Vintage Sound 93.1 FM, Tony Tone Show. Joining me on the MPW Digital TV Celebrity Hotline. This is a very special guest, David Spero, who managed Joe Walsh and was there when the Eagles got back together. He was a longtime friend of Glenn Frey. He's also had worked with people like Harry Nilsson, just to name a few. He's involved with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he's on the phone right now. Thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. Do you guys have a lot of snow?
We got maybe 2 inches, and this isn't like a made-up radio thing. I was just outside, like, throwing some salt, and and this is true, David. Hold on. It gets better. I watched a car, because we have, like, a weird setup. We have this long driveway out to a street. I watched a car slide into, like, a power box, so...
Oh, well, that's kind of cool. Good timing.
Right. So that happened like 2 minutes ago, and I came back in here, and I'm like, I got to get the phone. I got to get ready to talk to David, and I just watched a car. And, of course, the guy drove off, but he seemed to be okay. So,
oh, good. That's good.
So my morning isn't going as bad as that person's. I definitely want to say that I'm sorry for your loss of your friend Glenn Frey.
Thanks.
What a shock for most of us. The guy was, I've been an Eagles fan for a long time, and I just talk about him, the Glenn that you knew, and how are you doing? I guess maybe that's the first part of that question.
Oh, it's I was shocked when I heard about it. I knew that he had some problems, but I didn't realize how kind of advanced they had gone. And I figure anytime you're going to have to cancel going to the Kennedy Center to pick up an honor, that it must have been pretty serious. Mm-hmm. And Glenn and I knew each other back in the early '60s. He had a band called the Mushrooms, and that was the first time we met. And it was I don't know. After the Bowie thing, it was kind of weird because to me Bowie was like an untouchable, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's not like you didn't think of Bowie having friends and stuff, but Glenn was kind of like just a normal guy, Mm-hmm. He was a kid from Detroit with a guitar and went out to California and lived the dream and made it through. And he was much more mortal, I guess.
Right. Right. I know what you mean. No, I don't think anybody, it's like Keith Richards. Everybody thinks he's going to be around forever.
Forever.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I tell you what, though, 2016 has been off to a terrible start.
No kidding. No, a friend of mine yesterday said, how ironic, we lose Bowie, we lose Glenn, and Brian Wilson and Keith Richards still walk the earth, thank God for that. But
right.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Kind of crazy.
It's very.
Glenn was just, my favorite times with him were just, when he was being the regular guy, going to a baseball game, or when we were doing Hell Freezes Over. Mm-hmm. We were in Detroit at Tiger Stadium, and he walked me around the stadium and showed me where he sat for every major moment.
Wow!
This is where Al Kaline hit his 100th home run. I was sitting here, and that's who he was. He was just he was a regular guy. And I think one of the things, as far as I don't think we'll ever see an Eagles without Glenn.
I was going to say, it feels like that they couldn't do it without him. In more ways than one, right?
Well, we did see Queen with Paul Rogers, but...
Sure. Right.
But yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that happening because, first of all, Joe and Don and Timothy all have solo careers that are very successful, mm-hmm. And secondly, it was Glenn's band. He was the guy.
Right.
He was the leader. He made the decisions. As much as Don was kind of the voice of the Eagles on record, Glenn was very much the guy that cracked the whip and ran the rehearsals and everything went through him.
And having never met or talked to Glenn, unfortunately for me, I could not stop watching that History of the Eagles documentary, and I thought it was so compelling, David, when Glenn was talking about Hell Freezes Over and getting back together. And Glenn is sitting there on camera saying, Don and I said we were going to get paid more because we kept the Eagles in the spotlight with our solo works. And I thought, that is brutal honesty, but I really appreciated it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I could appreciate the sentiment because it was true. I mean, the other guys did whatever. Joe, obviously, but those two really were out there, and he definitely seemed like he never held anything back. Glenn did.
No, he didn't. He didn't. And the way it kind of came together, I hadn't talked to Glenn for, I don't know. I was managing Joe Walsh, and I hadn't talked to Glenn since the Eagles had broken up. And just out of nowhere, one day he gives me a call. And he said, well, there was a restaurant, I'm in Cleveland, there's a restaurant here I always just take the Eagles to, and he was about to come through with his band, and he said, I want to take these guys to that restaurant. And I'm like, well, first of all, hi, Glenn, how you doing? We'll catch up at dinner, And he shows up, and, he was not aware that I was working with Walsh, and he didn't have very kind things to say about him, and I told him we didn't have kind things to say about him either. And it just turned out that we were both getting some misinformation, and that's when I first started talking to him about touring with Joe. Mm-hmm. And it was the Walsh Frey tour started literally, 2 months after that.
Wow.
I'd finally talked him into having a conversation with Joe and getting together, and we went out and did 40-some dates over the summer, and it was towards the end of that Azoff called me and said, Don wants to come and join in for a show, and we were doing a fundraiser for one of Glenn's charities out in Aspen, and that's when Don showed up.
Yeah.
And that night, the three of them kind of stayed up all night and talked about, what would it take. And the next morning, I get a call from Glenn. He said, there's a car waiting for you downstairs. I was at a hotel in Aspen, and I said, well, what's going on? He said, just get in the car, And I get in the car and go over to Glenn's place, and he's pacing with a glass of wine in one hand and a joint in the other, and he points to a pad, and he says, start writing, and I started writing what I titled the Glenn Commandments. And it was kind of like the outline for what would become the contract, bringing them all together for Hell Freezes Over.
Oh my gosh, that's such an incredible thing to be a part of. And David, have you? And I don't expect you to get too deep, and if the answer is no, that's fine too. But have you been in contact with Joe since, or any of the guys since the news of Glenn passing? Is it a phone call with condolences or text messages or anything like that?
Yeah, it's mostly just. Yeah, actually, the only one that I spoke with was Don Felder.
Okay.
And Don was. He says, he was just really broken up with it. And I talked to Bill Simzik, who was their producer. In fact, he was the one that kind of gave me all the news on it. And back and forth with Joe on just voicemails and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of went into a shell.
Yeah.
One of the guys I still work with is Richie Furay, and I know he talked, as soon as he heard it, he called Timothy B. and and talked to him about it. And, I guess, this just all hit everybody really hard.
It was terrible timing and just so unfortunate because that Kennedy Center Honors thing was going to be such a great and deserved,
absolutely.
Right? I mean, that was just, it was sort of like the last award that a band like that, I don't know. I knew that, like you said, I knew that Glenn had some issues and that they had to postpone that. And I thought, oh man, I really hope he can beat that, because he's one of the guys that everybody just seems to like. And David, I know that it's got to be tough. Before I let you go, and I know I'm running out of time, I just wanted to ask, because I'm curious. We have Alice Cooper's radio show on this station. I've met Alice a few times, and the Hollywood Vampires that came out this year. You worked and managed Harry Nilsson. In a sentence or two, with the time restrictions that we have, describe Mr. Nilsson.
I miss him every day. One of the funniest human beings. It was. It's funny. It was during that Aspen trip that it actually started that I worked with Harry. Mm-hmm. Him and Ringo were really good friends, and I had done a bunch of the Ringo tours because Joe Walsh was on those.
Right.
And for that charity thing I'm telling you about, we were looking for some items to auction off, and I said to Glenn, well, I'll go over to Ringo's and, get a drumhead signed or something. And, well, Glenn was just freaked out. You don't just call a Beatle. I'm like, no, it's okay, really. So I went over and I got the drumhead, and it was then that he said, listen, I want you to help out a good friend of mine, and it was Harry.
Wow.
And I'd met Harry many, many years ago when I was a disc jockey. He had come through Cleveland on WMMS, and we had a little talk, and we kind of hit it off. And I was really lucky. I got to work on his anthology, which was really a thrill. Mm-hmm. And he was writing a book at the time, which I still have the only copy of. And he was quite a character.
I can't even.
He would call me at 10 o'clock every morning and tell me a story, and then say, "Okay, let's go make some money."
Well, listen, David, I know you got to go. You're doing a bunch of these. I really appreciate the time. I'm sorry for your loss, and all the best to you, okay?
Thanks, Tony.